So now I'd like to, having done that, I'd like to switch over to the NB Power investigation, Madam Speaker, which we asked for in January. The government followed us up and wanted to do the same thing. It was very clear, though, that the timeline put on this by the Premier was too short. NB Power came back quickly and said, we can't do February, it's going to have to be April. People are still looking for answers, Madam Speaker. They are going to be people who are going to be paying spring, summer, and fall to try to pay off what they incurred over this winter, for all these increases. So what I'd like to ask the Premier is what process was followed to determine a date for this to be done, and who exactly made the decision? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
La parole est au ministre responsable de l'énergie.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for the question. The audit was obviously very important to a lot of New Brunswickers, and the extra time allowed for a much broader sample to be done. And what came out of that was three out of 500 was off on the meters, and out of those three, they were under registering kilowatts. So none of them went the other way. So the process of the audit was to make sure, because the bills are three-part. There's the usage, there's the charges, the rate, and then there's the taxes. We've done a pretty good job of taking care of a big chunk of the taxes. The previous government did a really good job on increasing the rates, and now we've got KPMG that confirmed that the process to find out what the usage is adequate.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I hope that New Brunswickers are paying attention, because here we've got a government that says they want to be transparent, but still no answers. My question was, who made the decision and what was the process followed to arrive at a date for this investigation to be done? The minister just admitted, well, they needed extra time. That's because this government has no idea the time that was needed to ensure that New Brunswickers got correct results. There's something like 20% of the results were indeterminate or inconclusive, Madam Speaker. So I don't know how the minister can speak with such confidence about how well this went. We have KPMG, and I quote, they obtained the data provided by NB Power and they assumed it was complete and accurate for their purposes. So, Madam Speaker, we're seeing the process here was flawed. We have a government that wants to take credit but doesn't want to take responsibility. My question again, who made this decision for the timeline and what was the process that was followed?
I recognize the Minister for Energy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, NB Power and KPMG, through the work that needed to be done, decided on the process and asked us for the time allotted. We are going to have a full report on May 15th, next Thursday, to Public Accounts, and all members can ask their questions again. Now, I did see a statement from the member, the critic for NB Power, saying that we should have KPMG audit the work of NB Power by looking at other people's work. How do you audit without now getting the information from NB Power? The audit is about NB Power's work and their processes. How can the opposition ask that we go through somewhere else and look at comparables? It's an audit, that by definition. And KPMG is a accredited auditor. They follow the process, and to say that it's flawed is incorrect, and it shouldn't be respected in this House. They are a confirmed company of audit, and they follow rules.
Je reconnais le leader de l'opposition officielle.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. I'm not questioning KPMG. I'm questioning the ability that they had to do an audit that was fair and impartial and was able to dig down and get answers for New Brunswickers, Madam Speaker, because that is the piece that we're missing. We have reports of people who were gone the entire winter, who had enough energy just to try to make sure their pipes didn't freeze, and their bills increased. And you could say, well, that's consumption, that was an increase in rates, and so on and so forth. It doesn't explain the doubling of their bills, Madam Speaker, and they weren't even home when in the previous year they were. So the reality, Madam Speaker, is we've got a government that is trying to shift responsibility. They want to take credit, but they want to shift responsibility. And all I'm simply asking is will this government take accountability for the timeline that they put on NB Power? I'm sure there was some back and forth. I'm sure there was calls to the Premier's office. New Brunswickers want to know who set the date for this failed audit that hasn't given any answers.
Je reconnais le ministre de l'Énergie.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, the member opposite coming out with a statement like a failed audit. We have KPMG, that is an accredited firm that went and did their work and came up with a result that says the process that NB Power uses to figure out consumption on the bills is good. The meters work, smart meters or the legacy meters, both of them work, and it's been proven by sampling, and it's accredited. So for the opposition to come back and put shade on that for political reasons is absolutely inadequate. It's absolutely inadequate. And it's time for him to stop. NB Power now has the process. Anybody in New Brunswick has the ability still to reach out to NB Power and they can study and look at the bills. And if you read the report, there's plenty of them that had lots of increases that were perfectly explainable. They can go and do the work and have them look at audit further. That is available, it's still there. But to say that it's a failed audit is absolutely wrong.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Ask New Brunswickers. Go ahead, Minister, and ask New Brunswickers if they feel that this audit was effective in answering their questions. And if it is not, then by definition, it's a failure. But it's not a failure of KPMG, it's a failure of this government. They wanted to rush out and say, look at what we're doing, we're studying this. But they didn't have enough sense to say, let's let NB Power and the auditing firm figure out a time that we could actually get an answer that will work for New Brunswickers. You know, we have the finance minister out there saying there will be no more help coming. They've spent their money on their budget and left themselves with absolutely no room to help New Brunswickers in a way that they need vitally, having a warm house, a warm place to stay for the winter. So again, I'm going to ask, what are they going to do to restore confidence in not only their ability to manage government, but to help NB Power restore confidence in this audit?
I recognize the Minister responsible for Energy.
Madam Speaker, the people of New Brunswick wanted quick answers, and I believe the opposition was crying for that during the last session also, and that's when we got to, as quick as possible, we got the auditors come back with a report with a proper sampling of the meters. Now, we are also hearing a lot from New Brunswickers, and one of the big parts of what they're bringing up on their bills is the rates. And let's be clear about that. The reason the rates have gone up so much is because the previous government's ineffectiveness and their policies about putting out some conditions on NB Power that they had to go to EUB to ask for those rates because they were mandated some very, very strict conditions on meeting their targets. Now, they don't want to talk about that because that was done in the past, but that decision was done well before we ever came in government, and now we're trying to clean up that mess, the mess that they made.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
And at a steam with 10 seconds left, Madam Speaker, because they can't sustain a 1-minute answer to answer New Brunswickers on why their audit has not been able to give them answers. We've got a minister that's standing up and saying, well, it's the fault of the previous government. That is weak, Madam Speaker, absolutely weak. They said they had all the answers. They said that they could fix what was going on in the New Brunswick in their view, and they have failed, Madam Speaker. They can't even tell us how much this audit costs. I would love to hear from the Minister of Finance how much this cost, not only in terms of how much they paid KPMG, but what this cost in terms of resources for NB Power to do this audit. So I didn't get an answer on, well, this was who made the decision. I got answers of obfuscation and redirection and so on and so forth. I would like to hear, maybe on the fourth question that I'm asking today, how much did this cost, both from a contract for KPMG and also how much in NB Power's human resources did this cost?
I recognize the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I won't need a minute to answer that one. The member opposite will have his chance to ask that specific question. to NB Power in public accounts next week, which is the perfect opportunity to ask those very, very specific questions to NB Power, because NB Power paid for the audit, so you can get all the answers that he needs from that session next week.
Le leader de l'opposition officielle.
Oh, man. Minister of Energy, Minister of Finance doesn't know. And you will never be able to convince me, Madam Speaker, that there were not phone calls flying between NB Power and the Premier's office, NB Power and the Minister of Energy and the Minister of Finance about how they would go about this work. It is absolutely inconceivable, Madam Speaker. I can guarantee you that they've had their hands on this audit long before anybody else got it. And why were the basic questions not asked? How much did this cost? We're going to be held to account for this at some point. Obviously, they're trying to distance themselves from this, Madam Speaker, so they want to take credit for taking action. They don't want to take responsibility for the results. 20% of those results were either inconclusive or indeterminate. There are things that we cannot get answers. I ask again, how much did this cost? When will we get answers?
I recognize the Minister of Finance and Treasury Board.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm always surprised when the member opposite, the Leader of Opposition, says that he's obviously convinced of what happened and what was discussed behind closed doors, because when they were in government, I imagine some of that would have happened. But I also look at the last time that they were in public accounts, and the first question he asked the CEO was about their bonuses. When everybody, it took me less than a day to find out there's no more bonuses at NB Power. But to throw some shade against an organization, a public organization, first question that was asked, after 6 years in power, you would have thought they would know that, but they didn't obviously pay much attention to NB Power. And just to make sure that I didn't misunderstood what I seen in public accounts, the critic re-asked the question later on again. There is no bonuses paid to NB Power, but they're still trying to cast shade and try to cast anger out in public on an organization that's just trying to provide service to New Brunswickers and do it in a proper manner.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks again, Madam Speaker. I really think that he needs to go back to Hansard, Madam Speaker, and the actual reason why I asked those questions was to dispel, Madam Speaker, and if he wants to have a conversation with CEO Laurie Clark about why I asked that question, he can certainly ask that, Madam Speaker, but you know, I will never, ever stop asking questions, Madam Speaker, to make sure that New Brunswickers have facts, because this government will not do so. This government will not provide answers, Madam Speaker. So, again, we go back to the fact that this is a need for New Brunswickers to have answers, and this is a government that does not, they want to distance themselves from this, they don't want to own it, they want to blame the previous government, they want to blame all kinds of things, Madam Speaker. But at the end of the day, it is they who set the date for this to be done. And New Brunswickers want to know why they are not getting answers. 20% is indeterminate. Is this acceptable to this minister? Does he support this audit?
Je reconnais le ministre des Finances et du Conseil du Trésor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, the timeline that was set out for this report was one that was sufficient for KPMG to do their work. They came back with a solid report explaining exactly what was going on. The big question that we've always had in this House was about meters. They went out and tested the meters. They did some questions. They went out and talked to 500 different homes, and they've got some good answers. They didn't just go to the people that had problems. They also went to people that had high increases in their bills, and they were perfectly explainable. They had all the questionnaires done that they needed to have done. So the member opposite says that we want to distance ourselves from us. We are doing a comprehensive review of NB Power to make sure that we have a strategic approach to what we're going to do for future years. Something that we didn't see from previous government at all. We just kind of went through, and they keep bringing up, like, don't leave it for future generations. Well, they certainly left it this time. We won't.